Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Google Hangout discussion. We're going to be talking about successful leaders begin with purpose. My name is Beverlee Garb, and I will be delivering today's session for you. I want to give a big shout out and thank you to the IEEE Women in Engineering International Leadership Conference for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this virtual portion of this fantastic, amazing event that they're hosting. And I want to give all of you guys a shout out as well for joining us globally around the world and participating in this event virtually as well. So at the conclusion of my presentation, I just want to let you know there will be a Q&A portion of the event, as well as throughout the presentation today. We're going to keep it interactive and light. I know this is the closing session. You guys are probably tired. Your head's probably filled with lots of information. And so we're going to keep it light, funny, interactive, just here to enjoy ourselves, really. I will be taking questions through your Google Plus and Twitter. So if you want to tweet any questions or participate in this conference, the hashtag is hashtag WIELEAD.com. That's WIELEAD.com. So hashtag WeLead.com. On your Google Plus page, you also have a chat box. Feel free to send any questions through there or interactions, and we will be taking those and including you in the presentation today. So again, Beverlee Garb here. I'm the owner of, I've been the owner of Soul Purpose International, Leadership Training International, and also you can view me and my speaking engagements at BeverleeGarb.com. So we are here to talk about how to bring purpose back into the workplace and why to bring purpose back in the workplace. We're going to see how living a life of purpose and being clear on your purpose can create quantum leaps in your life, both professionally and personally. But before we go into the solution, we need to understand the problem. And in my 20 plus years of working with leaders and entrepreneurs, I've definitely seen some themes in why entrepreneurs fail in their businesses, why leaders fail in their businesses. But I'd love to hear from you first. What are the most important issues facing you in your businesses? I know some of you are leaders, you're entrepreneurs, you're managers. Some of you are just sole proprietors or work for a company. I'd really love to hear from you. What would you say is the biggest issue that you're confronting or faced with in your business life, your professional life today? And again, you can chat on Google Plus, or you can tweet us at hashtag WIELEAD.com. Great, I already see some responses coming in, and so not enough money, not feeling like you're making the salary you're worth or you deserve in the company that you're with. That's a very common one that I hear. Life-work balance, absolutely. Trying to have a family while keeping your career going and making enough money where you feel like you're not just surviving, but you're thriving and you're going towards financial freedom. So how to find that life-work balance? Absolutely. Yeah, so burnout is another one I hear often, especially from women, just facing a lot of burnout in your leadership role or your role as an entrepreneur or a manager. Great. So we'll take one last one here. This is a common one, and I know specifically for people in IEEE that teams are spread out around the world now, given that you're a global organization, and a difficulty in finding a common vision, a common purpose, or maybe even communicating effectively with your teams. So thank you. Those are some really great feedback. Just to talk a little bit about the common reasons I find that entrepreneurs or leaders fail in their businesses. One would be that we enter a survival mode, which means that somewhere along the line we begin to put money before we put our value or our service, right? So maybe that's out of fear or whatever that's from. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth as we move through the presentation. But being in survival mode is a big reason why I find leaders and entrepreneurs don't make it in the long run in their businesses or their endeavors. A second reason I find is being a jack of all trades. So this is very common among women, particularly. Some of us enter a people-pleasing mode, and so we feel like whatever's thrown our way, we need to address or we need to do. So we become a jack of all trades instead of specializing in what is our purpose or our area of expertise, right? Afraid of letting somebody down, afraid of maybe even losing business if we're in survival mode. And so we spread ourselves very, very thin. A third reason would be obviously lack of capital, lack of funding or financial backing, or just poor financial decisions as we make our way through our businesses. And the fourth one is really having a lack of a long-term vision or a purpose. And this is the one we're really going to focus on today, right? It's being a little bit short-sighted, trying to make it through the day without having 100% clarity on where we want to end up in 5 years or what the purpose, the role of the business or the organization serves. So as I travel around the country and I speak to many organizations on bringing purpose back into the workplace, I'm often met with a little bit of a blank stare, and I can see that not everybody knows what purpose really means, right? We hear the term right now. I know in the US it's a kind of a sexy, very popular term, which is life purpose. What does life purpose mean? And so again, I'll put that out to you as the audience. Now, when I do this live, I have lottery tickets, and I sort of bribe the audience to interact with me, but I can't do that with you. So I'm going to ask you just to volunteer and let me know what life purpose or purpose means to you. Again, use your Google chat, or you can you can tweet at hashtag WIELEAD.com. So perfect. Some responses already coming in for this. And so somebody says it's doing something not just for the sake of doing it, but because it actually means something. Perfect. Obviously, that's a great definition of purpose. Doing something for the greater good. Absolutely. Something that provides a reward both personally and professionally. Absolutely. Something that benefits humanity. So it's other than just collecting a paycheck. You're doing something that you feel is, excuse me, benefits the greater good and contributes to humanity on a global level. Wonderful. Those are all wonderful answers, and there's no right or wrong. Today we're going to look at purpose as the reason someone or something exists. And I want to say that slowly, and I want to repeat it again. And as I repeat it, I want you to really let it enter your body and go in, and I want you to see how it makes you feel. The reason someone or something exists. And I want you to consider that there is a reason that you exist on the planet at this time. There is something that you do better than anybody else on the planet. And that is the reason that you exist. It's an essence, right? It's an essence that you put out into the universe in order to contribute to humanity on a larger level. And I wanted to address a little bit about why I use lottery tickets when I'm in a live audience. Well, number one, I'm trying to bribe the audience to interact with me. Very efficient. When I tell people they can win $40,000 by giving me an answer, you won't believe the amount of response that I get. But the second, and I think most important reason, is because living a life of purpose is not necessarily easy. Right? It entails leaving the herd mentality. It entails knowing for yourself on an inner compass, on an inner level, what's right and wrong for you. And it entails the courage to make decisions and have actions that are 100% aligned with who you are at your core, not who you're supposed to be. And I learned about gambling at a very young age. Now, whenever I start this story, my daughter rolls her eyes. She's 9 years old. She rolls her eyes and she said, TMI, Mom, nobody wants to hear this. But I'm going to tell this story because it's relevant to what we're talking about today. So I learned about gambling at a very young age. I was 9 years old. We had just immigrated from South Africa. And my dad decided, we hadn't been here not even a week. My dad decided we needed to learn about America. And so he piled us all into this little Honda Civic we had at the time, and he took us to where people go to learn about America. Vegas. Where else? So it must have been the second or third night we were there. He decides, and my mom apparently decide that they want some time alone. And they give my brother and I a $20 bill. And they say to us, go do whatever you want to do, right? I mean, unleashing 9-year-old and an 8-year-old in Vegas, maybe not the smartest thing, but they unleashed us and said, do whatever you want to do in the hotel. So we scattered off in different directions. About 2 hours later, I glance over my shoulder. I'm buying an ice cream cone, and I see my brother. And this big, huge, burly guy has my brother by the neck, and he's kind of dragging him along the lobby floor. So I run over, find out what happens. Turns out my brother had snuck through this big, huge, burly guy, and he had played slots for 2 hours, right? An 8-year-old. He had lost his $20, but he had this huge grin on his face. Now I ran to my parents to tell them what had happened. I was the responsible one in the family. And I held out my hand to show them I had $18.50 left. And I got a lot of props and kudos for being the responsible one, having the money left over. And he got, I think, grounded for the rest of the weekend. But that day, I learned an important lesson about purpose. I saw the price of not living a life of purpose written all over my brother's face. He had arrived in Vegas with a purpose, to have fun. And for him, that purpose was worth $20. I didn't really know my purpose. I was just hanging on to that $18.50 as if I would never see another dollar bill come my way. And since then, I've become a little bit of a risk taker, because I learned, again, to live a life of purpose entails taking some risks. Most importantly, it entails taking risks on yourself, taking risks on your inner belief and what you believe you're put on the planet to do at this time. And the good thing about purpose is that it also brings people together. It brings people together of common values, common beliefs, common purpose. I know that at the Triple E conference in California, there's been many people that have been brought together with a common purpose, to learn from each other, to gain more tools of the industry, to become better leaders. Generally, we like to do business with people who have common beliefs, values, and purpose, as we do. Think about it. Think about a time that maybe you're looking for a service in your business, or you're looking for a provider, and you have two options. One option is somebody who you found on the internet. They've been in business 25 years. They've got lots of testimonials, right? They look great on paper. And the other option is someone who's been in business maybe less than 5 years, but somebody, a colleague of yours, recommended them. They came highly recommended by a colleague. Who do you go with? I'm guessing, and at least the response I get most often, is that you go with option number 2. Somebody who comes highly recommended by somebody else that you trust. Because when we do business by others who have similar beliefs, value, and purpose as we do, we create an emotional resonance. We create trust. So the question becomes, why, when we form our organizational teams, when we put together our marketing material, or even when we decide what we're going to do as a career, why do we not take values, beliefs, and purpose into consideration? 9 times out of 10, I know some of you are managers, 9 times out of 10, we're hiring based on technical skills, perhaps background, experience, maybe education, but very rarely are we really tapping into what makes this person tick on an emotional level. Is community important to them? Is appreciation important to them? Is family important to them? Is life-work balance important? And does it fit into your culture, into what is important to you as an organization? So I have a theory of why this happens. And my theory is that as we get into business, we are filled with passion and purpose. But as the business grows, it begins to take on a life of its own, right? It begins to become an exercise of getting through the day-to-day operations rather than holding on to the larger vision or the larger purpose. And we as managers, as leaders, as entrepreneurs, we forget why we are doing what we are doing. It's a little bit like parenting. You know, I don't know if many of you are parents out there, but typically when I'm addressing an audience, at least 50% put up their hand that they actually are a parent. And think back to the time, especially women, that you were pregnant with this baby. There was a sense of excitement, of purpose. You wanted this child to have a better childhood than you did, right? You want her or him to have opportunities that you never had. So there's a sense of purpose aligned. I know when I was pregnant, I just wanted her to have, open more doors to her that maybe were open to me. I wanted her to have less heartache maybe than I've experienced, or pain. And then she was born, and I love her with all my heart. She was termed a high needs baby, which means we had to hold her for 14 months straight. We couldn't put her down. And even through that, my husband and I were aligned on a common purpose. We just tag teamed. We didn't sleep. We did whatever it took to make sure that she got what she needed. Right? And now she's moved into tweens. She's kind of moving into adolescence. And she has a life of her own. Most of the time, I'm simply trying to keep life together. Right? I have to tell the story. It was actually a few weeks ago. We bought a brand new dining room table. Right? Dining room table, chairs. We've saved up. We were very impressed with ourselves. And she stood up, and for some reason, she slammed her foot through one of our dining room chairs. It just struck her as something she should do. And I looked at her. I said, Brittany, what on earth are you thinking? Use the thing that sits on top of your neck. And as I said it, I thought, uh-oh. And she literally took her head and, bam, crashed it through a dining room chair. So the point is, she's just her own person, and I can never really predict what she's going to do or say. Around our household, I'm a little bit of an introvert. I love to speak. I love to be out in public. But at home, I love my space and I love my time. So I'm often telling her, I just need some space. Or it's usually more like, oh my God, I just need some space. And she's heard this since the time she was 2. So about a year ago, we were driving on a freeway in California. And we drove past this big open lot. There was a huge sign outside that said, space available. She is lit up. She looked at me, she said, Mama, next time you need space, I know where we can buy some. So again, children take on a life of their own, and I really never know what's going to come out of her mouth. But I've lost a sense of that why on many days because I'm struggling to just keep it together, keep life together. And that's the same in our businesses, right? Our businesses take on a life of their own, and we forget why we do what we do. So usually stress goes up, passion and purpose goes down, and we enter what I call survival mode. Remember, we talked about that in the beginning. And one thing I will absolutely guarantee you is that in survival mode, you are looking at who you should be, right? You're looking at other people who are competing with you in the marketplace, and you're trying to form your teams, and you're putting together your marketing materials based on who you think you should be. Now, interestingly, that also mirrors human behavior in many ways, right? At some point in our life, we forget who we are truly at our core, and we take on who we should be, who we're supposed to be, maybe based on our parents, our siblings, oftentimes schools, institutions. And we sort of set aside our purpose. Another story, I love to use storytelling as a way to illustrate a point because I think we're all human, whether we're engineers or doctors or lawyers or speakers or consultants, we really all have a similar human core that relates to experiences with each other. But I was sitting on a couch one day in my living room, and I look out my window, and there's this little guy. He must be 5. He's sort of marching on over to our house. He's on a mission. And he rings our doorbell. My daughter opens the door. We hadn't seen him before. He must have been new to the neighborhood. And she says to him, "Hi, I'm Brittany." And he looks back and he says, he's kind of stuck out his little hand, and he had a very thick Southern accent, and he goes, "Hi, I'm annoying." And I realized that day he had been told he was annoying so many times that he believed that's who he actually was. So again, we get told so many times societally or institutionally who we are, we actually forget who we truly are. But there is a price to being who we think we should be rather than who we are, right? We're currently the most in debt, over-medicated, obese adult population in U.S. history. And I'm not saying that to bring us down. I'm just saying that when we live a life of who we should be rather than who we are, there's a tension created. It's a little bit like a bungee cord, right? One side of you is pulling at who you should be, and the other side is pulling at who you truly are at your core, and it creates a tension till eventually it'll pop, creating physical, mental, emotional problems. And I also think it creates financial problems. It's very difficult to have quantum leaps financially or really reach your financial goals when you're actually trying to squeeze yourself into who you should be rather than who you are as a leader and as an entrepreneur and even as a manager leading teams. So I'd love to take a few minutes here and do an interactive exercise that can help you remember who you are at your core. Now, many of you have this on your Google Plus page. There's 2 PDFs that are posted on the Google Plus page. One says core value list, another says what is your why. If you don't have that, you can actually get it at the website as well, IEEE-WIE-ILC.org. It's under the virtual track under Beverlee Garb. Now, you may not have time to print this out, but I want you to just play along with me as we go through this exercise. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to find those PDFs, and I'm also going to show you what they look like, right? The core value list looks something like this. It's a list of words on a page, and the what's your why is a circle. The inner circle says why, and the outer circle says what, and that's what we're going to focus on. Now, I want you to think of a time in your career that you felt you were really serving a greater purpose. You just felt open, and you felt right, and you felt aligned, and you knew without a doubt you were doing what you were supposed to do. And it might be in your career now, it might be in a past career. And I want you to just jot that word down on a piece of paper, right? I'll give you a little example. When I first did this exercise, I went to see a business consultant. I was feeling lost. I owned a day spa in Southern California, and while it was thriving, I had this inner sense that I was more in survival mode. I was doing something that was a little bit more for money than what I really wanted to do. I went to see my business coach, and he said to me, think about a time in your career that you were completely aligned and excited about what you were doing. And I want you to just write that down on a piece of paper. And I thought about a day at my spa where I was less about the services I was offering. It was a lot more about what I was contributing to the greater good. There was a day particularly where I felt that I was having women see their inner purpose. I was having women see that there was more to their life than just what they look like or their skincare regime. And so I said to him, you know, that's what that was to me. And he said, what word would you pick that would sum that up for you? And I said the word transformation. He said, good, write that down on your piece of paper. I wrote that down on my piece of paper, and he said, that's your purpose. And then he charged me $350. So what we're doing today is worth a value of $350. So again, I'm going to ask that of you. Think about the time of your life, or it might be a day, it might be a minute, where you felt excited about what you were doing. You felt like you were contributing to the greater good, and just simply write it down. And now I want you to use the sheet of paper that lists the words for you. It's a core list. And I want you to pick a word that jumps out as you of encapsulating that experience. If you don't have the piece of paper, just choose a word. Here are some examples that I have. Accomplishment, appreciation, benevolence, professionalism, transformation, integrity. These are the kinds of words I'm looking for. Just let it come to you. I know many of us are engineers, and so we want to analyze everything, but don't let this get to where it's too complicated. Just let the word come, and write that down in the inner circle where it says why. If you don't have the sheet of paper, just draw a circle, write why in it, and write your word. Now in your outer circle where it says what, I want you to jot down what you do in your career. Right, so a lot of us play many roles. I'm a consultant. I help women put together home-based businesses that want an online business. I speak. I teach. So these are all of what I do. Just write those down. And again, don't get too complicated with it. I just give you a couple minutes here to write down those words. So you might be a manager. You might be a facilitator or an educator. You might be an engineer. You might be a boss. And now I want you to look at all of your whats you do, and I want you to really see, are they 100% aligned with your inner circle, which is your why? Or are you doing things in life out of the reasons we talked about initially? Being in survival mode, which means you're more motivated by money than you are by the value or service that you're providing. Being a jack of all trades, meaning you are trying to be everything to everybody and you haven't really honed in on or had the courage to 100% focus on what it is you excel at and what gives you joy and passion. Or number 3, are you doing things in your life that aren't aligned with a greater vision or purpose? Do you want to be doing in 5 years what you're doing now? And this is where the courage comes in, the gambling and the risk. Just quietly to yourself, see if you have the courage to either infuse your purpose and passion into the what's that you're doing, or let it go. Right? There was a recent Gallup survey that showed that 70% of American workforce would classify themselves as being disengaged or emotionally disconnected from what they're doing. That's 70% of people in our workforce going to work every day, getting out of bed in the morning, and doing something they don't enjoy. Right? These people might be on your team. Now, when these people were surveyed, they also said that the primary factor influencing how they feel about their jobs is their direct supervisor. So for you to be able to motivate a team, for you to be able to keep a team inspired and passionate, the first step is you being inspired and passionate. The first step is you leading with your why in everything you do in your life and communicating that why. Right? So many of us have these plaques on our walls. Most of the clients I speak to have been through exercises to clarify their vision. They have a vision statement, right? And I know they do because they have it up on their wall in their office, or they have it up on the wall in the lobbies. But they don't share it with anybody. They don't look at it on a daily basis and make sure they're making decisions and aligning their actions with this inner why, with this inner purpose. I had a client call me, it was recently, a couple months ago, and she called me. She was distraught. Her name was Jane. I could barely understand a word she was saying. And finally she got her story out. She told me that she owned a supply chain within the beauty industry, and finally she told me that her business had gotten out of hand. She was just trying to do the day-to-day management of the business, and she was overwhelmed. Now, she decided she was going to hire a manager. This manager's name was Linda. Now, on paper, Linda looked perfect. She had the credentials. She had the experience. She had the technical skills to do the job. And for a few months, Linda was outperforming Jane. She had the team coming to work. She had the team inspired. Things were running well. Until she started to really run the place from her vision. Jane had failed to make sure that Linda was aligned with her purpose and her vision. So as Linda started to run the business in her vision, and Jane started to become more and more clear on her purpose, there was a clash. And when Jane confronted Linda, Linda ended up walking out and taking all of the staff with her. Jane had to shut her doors. There was nothing she could do. She didn't have any staff. There was no way she could handle the day-to-day business operations on her own. And she slumped on her desk. She started to do what a lot of women do when we feel overwhelmed. She started to cry. And as she was sitting there crying, she was racking her brain to understand who was to blame for all of this, right? She was looking for some person to blame. And finally realized there was one person that was absolutely responsible for that. And that would be me, her business coach. So by the time she called me, she was furious. She walked into my office and she said, "You told me if I knew my why, if I knew my inner purpose, my business would run well. My business would be more functional, and it's not. Look at where I am today." And I looked at her and I said to her something that a business coach had said to me. And I said, "Jane, are you managing mushrooms or are you growing sunflowers?" And she looked at me with the same irritation in her eyes that I had when my coach asked me the same question, because let's face it, you're not in the mood for metaphors when your life is falling apart. And she said, "I have no idea what you're talking about, but it doesn't seem to apply to me." And I looked at her again and I said, "Jane, are you managing mushrooms or are you growing sunflowers? Think about it. Mushrooms grow in dark, dank environments. When they're kept out of the light for long enough, they proliferate and they take over. Sunflowers, on the other hand, they look like weeds when they're first growing. But with enough light and nourishment, their stalks become firm, they grow upwards in a very predictable direction, and when they're ready, they blossom and they bloom." So Jane, are you managing mushrooms or are you growing sunflowers? And she looked at me and she said, "Mushrooms. I'm managing mushrooms." And I'm not making fun of Jane because we're all prone to do this. We're all prone to keep our purpose, our light, our why in the dark. We don't share it on a daily basis with our teams. We don't hire from it typically. And when we do, the day-to-day running of a business gets so overwhelming, we forget to continue to nourish and keep them in the light. So I would have you, as we come to the conclusion of this presentation, I would have you start to consider, are you managing mushrooms or are you growing sunflowers? And that doesn't only relate to your team, it relates to yourself as well. Are you treating yourself as a mushroom, allowing yourself to stay in a dark place with very little light or nourishment, and beginning to fester with resentment, fester with anger, fester with the sort of under-earning that you've created for yourself? Or are you treating yourself like a sunflower, planting yourself in nourishing soil that feeds and grows yourself on all levels, allowing the slow process of nourishment to strengthen that stalk and grow in a direction that you have chosen, a predictable direction, governed and managed by your inner purpose, by your inner compass, right? Do you know where you're heading, where you want to be in 5 years or 10 years, or are you sort of going willy-nilly, flowing with what comes up next for you? And are you aligning your actions on a day-to-day basis that will guarantee when that stalk is strong enough, you blossom and you bloom? I'm going to leave you with that question, and I'm going to invite you also to take this exercise we've done, and maybe you didn't have time for it, or maybe you couldn't print out the PDFs. I'd invite you to go back to YouTube and re-listen to this video. And take that why that you've come up with, right? For me, it was transformation. For other people, oftentimes it's something about appreciation or value or integrity. I want you to put that somewhere where you can see that on your computer or in your office. And I want you to focus on that this week and ask yourself, as you make your decisions through the week, as you manage your teams, as you put in place actions, are you making sure that we're starting with why and then choosing your decisions and actions? Because great leaders begin with why and work from the inside out, right? Martin Luther King said, "I have a plan." Martin Luther King said, "I have a dream." He didn't say, "I have a plan." So as leaders, I'm going to invite you to focus on the inner circle and move from the inner out. Start with your why and then choose your actions and decisions that move you closer towards your goal on a daily basis. So thank you so much, everybody. I would like to thank again David and IEEE for this lovely presentation and for inviting me to be here today. This concludes today's Hangout session. I do want to invite you to visit the IEEE website again and to re-listen to a lot of the audios and videos that you've heard this week. You can re-listen to them on your YouTube channel. So again, it was a pleasure to be here, and thank you, everybody.